something better here because there were like homesteading kind of opportunities. So they came through Boston and found out that there was work in Wisconsin, quarrying and logging and stuff like that. So they worked their way up here, and I'm related. They changed their spelling to Miller, but the rest of the family members that came later and cousins and stuff, a lot of them just kept Mueller. So the AC Tap, like Steve and Tara, yeah, those are my second cousins and stuff. And Eric and Joyce and all them up on German Road. So the one bunch of cousins was pretty lonely, and they wrote to all the rest of them and said, this is kind of like home here. And so they encouraged them all to come over, and a bunch of them did. And that's why in the German settlement between Bailey's Harbor and Sister Bay, a lot of us are related to each other. So we settled this area, and in 1887, when I was researching down at the Register of Deeds, they said that they didn't get their land taxed until you built a house. In 1887 was when the first taxable structure went up on the property. And this cabin used to be up next to my dad's by the farm when you come down the road, and that barn that needs some paint, and I keep threatening to get time to do that. Yeah, so the house was right next to where my dad ended up building, and when we had the farm here, it was 12 milk cows, 144 chickens, and hogs, and everything was kind of self-sufficient. I mean, you know, it was like you did everything on the farm, cured our own hams and things like that, did our own bacon, made sausages, smoked things, hunted, still do, and everything you supplied yourself with, except when we went to the grocery store, sugar and things like that were, you know, stuff that you got, butter, because we didn't make our own butter back then when I was a kid. So you learn self-sufficiency, and eventually dairy farming wasn't profitable anymore, and you had to upgrade, just like nowadays everybody's got to upgrade. So the cows got sold, and the workhorses, originally my dad said they cleared land with oxen when he was a kid, which yeah, that's a lot of work, because you got to tie them to the stump and make them spin the stump out of the ground. And I'm like, wow, because they cleared up by my dad's, there's about 18-acre field, and then where I am, all those were farm fields down there, except for the one 10 acres is really interesting glacial till drop, so it's like little Kettle Moraine area, and that's where the lime kiln was. And they burned their own lime, took about 3 weeks, threw the rocks in, and he kept the fire going, and that was what they used for the mortar for the house when it was originally built. And the logs, I thought they were cedar, but builders said no, they were either tamarack or hemlock, and we do have hemlock on the property, so it's a possibility, because when they came to move the house from 2576 kind of Grove Road down to here, I was working on cars and my husband was watching, and shooty movers from Wausau were the only ones that would come and do this. And the guy had a loader that was probably about the size of the yard, and he gave the house a push, and it sprung back in place. He says, "We're good to go." And I'm like, oh yeah, the hair on my arm still stands up. I would have had heart failure. So they moved it down the road, and there's a picture of it inside. And then we set it here and put it on a regular foundation, because over at the other site, it was just the rocks, you know, the seabed underneath, and the downstairs cellar was about, you could be about a little over 4 feet, and then you'd hit your head on the beams. So that's where everything got stored for the winter. So when we brought it here, then we ended up having to build up the area with sand, because zoning made us put it on our own 10 acres. So we built it up around there, and the basement stays really cool year round. And then we did there was always a front porch. It wasn't this big. Dave Valentine helped us with some of the design stuff and other things we had in mind with what we wanted. And in the meantime, when Jimmy and I were taking the other house apart, we kept all the stone off the foundation, or most of it, and it came back here, and that's used around on the foundation and for the rock gardens and things like that. And then we took the wood that we saved and made furniture out of it. So furniture you're gonna see in there, like the coffee table in the living room, that was Grandma's pantry cupboard, and it was one log. It was a cedar log this wide, and it's like you don't see anything like that anymore. And it was all sawed and all stained with cherry juice. It was pretty interesting. Cool. You can still see where there's the reddish stain in it. And so we reused all that stuff, and then got different saplings and stuff, and made legs with mortise and tenon and stuff. And so we tried to keep everything as authentic, and the kitchen table was made out of the maple boards from the back. There was a covered back porch, which I might have to do now again, because the mason said in order to protect the masonry back porch, maybe I should think about that. Yeah. So we took those boards and planed them down some, but you can still see the saw marks in a lot of the wood that we used. And when it got rebuilt, so we could keep the logs, we figured it lasted as long as it did because the outside was covered with clapboard on two sides and with cedar shake shingles on the other two sides. And the clapboards in the front were so that you could show the neighbors that you were kind of well-to-do, because if it was all just shingles, it was like you were poor. So that's how that was. And so we decided we would try and do that same thing so that we could expose the logs inside, because we tore off 13 layers of oilcloth and wallpaper down to, and I got a chunk of it, the Abendpost. And that was a German newspaper out of Chicago. It was like a weekly thing, and they had we couldn't read it, but my Aunt Hertha still knew German, so she read it and she said, "Oh, this is a market report and the chapter a day." They would have a story that continued every day in the paper. So that's hanging on the wall by the kitchen table too. So we saved what we could. The contractor, when he was doing everything, found Scotch peas up in the upstairs, because that used to be a granary, and but he didn't know what they were, so he threw them out. It's like, oh, because that's kind of like lentils, and they have them over in Europe. So there was that, and we found out that the knee walls upstairs were actually pinned 3 logs high, and they drilled down. It would have had to been by hand, and they made wood dowels and they pounded them in to keep that part rigid. So there were all kinds of interesting things, and we had the walls sandblasted because at one point the bedroom walls were painted pink. They had plaster on them and lath, and the ceiling was painted white. And then from the years of the wood cook stove, the ceiling in the kitchen and the living room had all turned black. So to make everything match, and they sandblasted everything, and then they rechinked using these foam wedges that they have nowadays, and those got put in between the logs, and then they have a chinking that's flexible now, and it has insulation value, and did that. And then we insulated on the outside after the electrician did all the wiring and stuff, and then did the cedar shake shingles. And we did the same with the ceiling upstairs. We kept the open boards exposed, and then they insulated from the outside out and furred up to get that. So, and they actually, Carl Huber was the one that did the work, and because the stairway had to be up to code, We moved it from over where the refrigerator area is, and it was a little tiny windy thing that you would go up that was about this wide, and the steps were about this high in between. And he moved the beam over, had a new beam made, put that in by himself, and then moved another beam over in the living room so we could get the 3-foot width that we needed for the new stairway. And then the upstairs was basically open, and you know, boys slept in one area, girls slept in the other, and they had curtains in between, but we needed 2 bedrooms, so that happened and he made that work.
Nice.
And that's where we're at.
All right.
So if you want to tour, the cook stove is my grandma's. She got it in the 1890s for $50 from Sears and Roebuck, and $50 back then was probably a boatload of money. And it got shipped here, and then I didn't know it came all apart. So when we went to have it cleaned up and the nickel replated down in southern Illinois, he said, "Why didn't you take it apart?" I said, "We only thought the water tank came off and nothing else seemed to want to come apart." "Oh, sure, 6 pieces." It's like, so the trip back home was a lot faster than the trip down. So that was done, and yeah, we tried to keep things as authentic looking as we could. You know, you couldn't use kerosene lamps, so we got lamps upstairs that looked like kerosene. So yeah, a lot of thought went into it. Different fixtures and things that are more authentic. In the one fixture in the living room and by the back door, my uncle was a contractor, and he took them out of a house in Milwaukee, and we got them rewired when they went in because the electrical was a little suspect at that point in time, so he did all the rewiring on that.
So were there already cherry trees here when you came?
No, well, there weren't cherry trees here. Yeah, there were cherry trees because my folks had up there, Grandma and Grandpa, you needed to supplement just raising the cows with some other kind of income because every year you mortgaged off the whole farm in order to get the seeds for the next spring planting, and then in fall you paid the mortgage off, and it went, you know, it did that for years, and it's like, wow, it's a risk. Well, that's what you got to do. And my folks had about, I would say 10 acres of cherries. And then my dad said when he was a kid, they had 5 acres of cucumbers and 4 or 5 acres of strawberries and raspberries. And the kids would all have to pick that stuff. And, like the berries and things you could sell up here, but the pickles went down to what was Larson Cannery in Green Bay because they would buy pickles from all the farmers. So that's what happened with that. My dad didn't have a real love for cucumber picking. I can see why. So yeah, I picked cherries. We got apples. I've got apples down there, except the deer got a lot of them and the squirrels. So yeah, it's a battle with the critters this year because it's so dry. And then the kraut thing, well, I was raised sitting next to the kraut crock in the kitchen because it was warm. And I liked the kraut. I wasn't so fond of the scuzzies on the top, but the way you make kraut now, you can avoid that. So I've got, I do the modern thing, and we wanted to keep the farm going, but I didn't want to get into, a lot of like grain crops and things like that. So we grew our own cabbages for years, and then towards the end, well, you're getting a little older, and you plant 1,000 cabbages, and the deer eat all the transplants off in one night.
Whoa.
Yeah, I was like, whoa, they're all gone, and you can't regrow the transplant. You'd have to start all over. So then 2 years running, they got flooded out, and then another year, cabbages aren't supposed to freeze, but those poor little guys had a really hard frost, and they didn't make it. So now I ordered the same kind of cabbage that we always grew, and the people that we get it from, the vendor is real good about getting what we're looking for, and that works. And I'm not on my hands and knees for days. with the cabbages. Now they're eating my tomato plants. Like,
Squirrels were vicious this year.
oh, they are. I mean, the year before my plums were there. I went to pick my plums, and all that were left were pits in the crotch of the tree. And I'm like, there's 3 plums left on the tree and all these pits? Yeah.
Squirrel soup.
Yep. Yeah. Well, yeah. I was relocating a bunch of squirrels, but you know, if winter gets pretty tough this year, we're gonna be sweet sour squirrels pretty good. So, yeah, and then deer hunting, do that, and I process my own deer. So, hoping to get something this year.
Good.
So if you guys want to come on in, come on in. We got the AC on, so it'll be nice in here.
You must not sleep.
I do. Some nights more than others.
Nice.
But yes, the starting bell rings at either 5 in the morning or 6:30 at the latest.
You've lived in Door County your whole life, never lived anywhere else. I mean, from
Yeah.
the sounds of it,
Yeah.
that is just,
Yeah.
that is just so beautiful. I mean, you know, you're very community and very giving of your time.
Yeah, there's a picture of the house moving. It was up on blocks and it was on a trailer and they got stuck coming up the hill. Because the driveway had a rise and it was a little wet and the semi started to slip and it's like, ah! So we used the skid steer to give them a little bit of a boost.
Did you have to rework your
The
flooring?
floor was worn out. Where my grandma sat and peeled potatoes every day and stood in front of the cook stove, she actually wore the 3/4 inch wood out. And there was linoleum over it. But Carl Huber found a house down in, I think it was Landstrom's, down in Sister Bay. He was taking that apart and renovating it. So we bought the flooring because it was the same kind of flooring and the
Yeah,
same
it's
width,
beautiful.
and he reworked the whole floor. And then this is a floating floor system. So the foundation was actually about this wide. There was stone. We have clay loam that was in between, and then there was stone again on the inside. And that's the foundation for the walls. But the floor itself is on its own foundation that can be adjusted. So there's a little dip here and there, but where the wood stove was, there was a big dip because the wood stove used to be where the fireplace is. And there was a wall just with a door that went into the kitchen. And so Carl got in there and he was able to adjust, and then you put the jack posts underneath in the basement and do the turn screw thing, and it's as level as it's gonna get.
Is
So
it
that
maple?
electric fireplace?
No, that's a gas
That's gas,
fireplace.
okay.
And it's designed to heat the entire house should the power go off.
Okay. And that's set right here, right?
Yep.
Okay, gotcha.
Timer, and then there's a
Yep.
fan speed switch down there. And that beam above your head, that used to be the bedroom wall, and that was a supporting wall. So Carl took out the supporting wall and put an I-beam in there, and then hollowed out the cedar log to fit over the I-beam, so it
Oh,
didn't
wow.
show. Yeah, he was
And that's why
into
it's
it.
strapped to the.
Yep.
Okay.
And the people on the walls are like grandma and grandpa and all the kids, and the kids married their
Yeah.
marriage photos.
Yeah, I think it is maple. Is that maple flooring?
Yes.
Yes, I think so.
It's nice. Yeah, it's nice and flexible.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't do it, Carl
Cleaned
did,
up.
but I had to do some repairs and holy cow.
Good.
Yeah.
I think it was Carl that was gonna get us all those beams and all those logs over the time we were gonna build that house. Here's the bathroom.
They didn't close, and then when you put it on the regular foundation,
We still
they
have
work.
heat,
But
if the electric goes out,
because
she'll
of
have to go
code
back.
and not having to put up screens and all that
Oh,
stuff
there's
and
some-
storm windows, we went with new windows and we had special
Oh,
orders
that's
and
cute.
stuff like that, and stained glass where it
You
needed
gotta
and
go.
yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, I did a hundred and
Must have
twenty
it
some
on.
old home many years ago. We had 55 new windows, and everyone in custom ordered. And it's just because it was the sizes.
Yeah, the sizes weren't the same.
It is.
Yeah, that was covered in the pantry, or the countertop in the pantry, and Jimmy did the woodworking, and then I had to do the finishing, he routed the edges and stuff like
And
that.
this is the table they had with cherry.
Yeah, that has
with
cherry
cherry
stains, and that divot on the end by your knee there, that was from one of the guests leaving a candle burning, and then they went upstairs to bed, and the smoke alarm went off,
Oh.
and they never came back again. But I sanded until it all went away and then.
Put them in your book instead. Like, they're gonna burn the place
Yeah.
down.
It is one big tree,
Yeah,
you know, the.
It
you
was.
get the old growth trees.
yeah,
You get
the
those
original
black lights,
trees,
yes,
yeah.
yes, you will see it.
Oh, yeah.
And you can-
Yeah.
The sawhorse there.
We saw a little table down in Appleton at Shields with that Envirotech on it.
Yep.
And we went, oh, this is a nice table, let's see how much an 8-footer is. And then we went, oh, I don't think so. So we made our own.
There you go.
I look at the Envirotech,
That's
did
nice
you work
stuff.
with it? Did you
Yeah.
work with it?
Yeah, you gotta put a lot of plastic
Oh,
on the
yeah,
floor so when
yeah.
it drizzles over the
And you get all
side,
little
but
bubbles.
you little bubbles, but then we heated it with the mat gas and the bubbles went away and,
If you didn't have that, you know, you could just go,
oh, you could.
and they pop right up.
Oh, well, I
Yeah,
have
'cause-
mat
'cause
gas
yeah,
at the shop.
Yeah, for small projects, all you
Yeah.
do is breathe on it.
Oh, okay, alright, and I haven't had to refinish it yet.
But you know, you can pour right over that. If you
Oh,
ever had-
well,
if you
I
ever had
wondered
to,
about that,
If you
yeah,
ever had to, you just give it a light stuff.
Okay, all right.
And then pour right over.
okay,
And it'll come right back.
okay.
Yeah, that's neat though. Beautiful.
In the wood cook stove, we couldn't use that oven because the guy that did the renovation said by the time you put all the elements and things in it, you wouldn't be able to fit anything in the oven, so that's why there's a separate oven. So we just use it for pot and pan storage and things.
So now the generator insert.
That took a while of us researching online for specific sizes, and the guy said, well, he'd only ever done gas, and it's like, no, we don't want gas. So we researched and we found something, and he only had to trim 1/8 of an inch
Oh,
off of
that's
the original, grates that were in
Right,
there,
right.
and it dropped right in, and he was like, wow, this is really nice. So he decided he would do electric pots afterwards.
Absolutely.
And we couldn't get it dipped. It was gunmetal blue when, before the restoration was done, but there were no tanks big enough in the United States anymore to dip that whole main body of the stove in one big,
Oh, for the porcelain.
Yeah. so. And then Valley Cabinets did a
Oh,
great
beautiful.
job,
I was gonna say.
because that was just kitchen all that time, and, there was no bathroom. Where the bathroom is now was pantry, and the oven was over here, and then you went out the back door to the back entry shed where the wash machine and wringer washer, and the wash tubs lived, and laundry got done, and